Previously on covenant with the ancient god of destruction. After the death of his feared father, Chike stood at a crossroads. The once mighty household of power now seemed vulnerable, and the people of Umuagu whispered that his strength was untested. But as he searched through the shadows of his father's life, he uncovered the chilling truth, the kind of sacrifices that had bound his father to Alaogbaga, the ancient god of destruction, sealed in blood and fear. With enemies closing in and honor at stake, Chike must decide, will he go as far as his father did, or even further, to rise as the most feared and favored among the worshippers? The drums of destiny have only just begun to sound. Stay with us, for Chike's hunger for power deepens in ways no one in Umuagu can escape. Subscribe now and witness the covenant unfold.
The sun rose slowly over the village, spreading its golden light across the farmlands. Weeks had passed since the burial of Chike's father, yet the whispers about the family had not died down. People still gathered in small groups, talking in hushed voices about the evil that had walked with the man they had just buried. On this morning, Chike and his wife were out in the field. With a cutlass in his hand and sweat already forming on his brow, Chike slashed at the thick bush that covered the land. His wife bent low, gathering the weeds into heaps, her eyes darting around as if she feared someone might be watching. The land they were clearing was not just any land. It once belonged to Mazi Kalu, a respected elder in the village. Years ago, Chike's father had seized it without mercy. Everyone remembered how Kalu had begged and fought to keep his inheritance, but no one could stand against the man who not only worshipped Alaogbaga, the god of destruction, he was also highly favored among other worshippers. As Chike worked, the sound of footsteps broke the morning calm. Mazi Kalu himself appeared at the edge of the farm. His wrapper was tied loosely around his waist, his eyes burning with rage. He stood tall, pointing a trembling finger at Chike. "Chike!" he shouted, his voice echoing across the farmland. "So you dare to touch this land, the very land your wicked father stole from me? Even in death, his greed lives on in you." Chike froze, his hand gripping the cutlass. His wife straightened up, fear flashing in her eyes. The villagers who were farming nearby stopped what they were doing, turning to watch. Mazi Kalu's anger grew. He lifted both hands to the sky, his voice trembling with fury. "Let the gods of the land judge you. Let Alaogbaga himself strike you down. May the soil you till never yield you peace, and may the same spirits that gave your father power turn their wrath upon you." The air grew heavy. The villagers gasped at the boldness of the curse. Some shook their heads, whispering that no one should call on Alaogbaga lightly. Chike's wife clutched his arm, urging him to leave. But Chike stood still, his face dark and unreadable, his jaw tight as the words of the curse lingered in the wind. The stage was set. The clash between the living and the shadow of the dead had begun. The tension in the air was heavy, like a storm about to break. Mazi Kalu's words of curse still rang in the wind, and the villagers who had gathered whispered among themselves. Chike's eyes, sharp and unblinking, fixed on the old man. He stepped forward slowly, his hand still gripping the cutlass, his face hard and unfeeling. "Mazi Kalu," Chike said in a low voice that carried across the field, "stay away from this land or you will regret it. My father may be gone, but his shadow still walks with me. Do not test me." The old man's anger boiled over. His veins stood out on his neck, his voice cracking with fury. "You think you can threaten me, boy? This land is mine. No matter what evil your father did, I will not stand by and watch you claim it." With those words, Mazi Kalu rushed forward, his bare feet pounding the soil. He came at Chike with the strength of a man burning with rage. The villagers gasped, some shouting for him to stop, others holding their breath as the clash unfolded. But before Kalu could reach Chike, the sky darkened. A sudden wind blew across the farmland, bending the tall grasses and filling the air with a strange, piercing sound. It was as though the earth itself had opened its mouth. Then, in a flash, Alaogbaga, the god of destruction, answered. A thunderous roar split the air, and an unseen force struck Mazikalu. His body convulsed violently, lifted for a moment as though gripped by invisible hands. Then, with a terrifying crack, his chest tore open. Blood sprayed across the farmland, falling on the very soil he had fought for. The villagers screamed and scattered in fear, running as fast as their legs could carry them. Some fell to the ground, wailing that the wrath of Alaogbaga had been unleashed. Chike stood still, watching as Kalu's lifeless body crumpled to the earth. His face showed no pity, no shock, only a cold satisfaction, as if a door had just opened inside him.
The village had not yet recovered from the shock of Mazikalu's sudden death when another man fell. This time it was Nana, a bold farmer who had been gathering courage to challenge Chike. Nana had gone to the king, asking him to summon Chike to explain what really happened on Kalu's land. But before the king could act, Nana was found dead in his compound, his whole body black like it had been burnt by thunder, and his face twisted as if he had seen something that filled him with terror. The news spread like fire through the village. Men gathered under the iroko tree, speaking in hushed tones. Women carried the gossip to the market, their voices sharp with fear. Children listened wide-eyed as their mothers whispered warnings not to go near Chike's compound. "This is not ordinary," an elder said, shaking his head. "How can two strong men fall just days apart, both connected to Chike?" "Chike is no longer the same man," another replied. "Have you looked into his eyes recently? They are not the eyes of a man we used to know. They are cold, like a river in Harmattan. Even when the sun is hot, his eyes carry no warmth." The villagers agreed. Chike had changed. He no longer joined in laughter at the palm wine tapper's hut. He no longer lingered at the marketplace. His words were fewer, and when he spoke, they carried a strange heaviness, like a curse hanging in the air. His aura seemed darker, heavier, as though a shadow followed him wherever he went. Rumors quickly took root. "Perhaps he has gone back to the shrine of Alaogbaga," some whispered. "Perhaps the spirit that guided his father now rests in him." Others swore they had seen signs. One hunter claimed he saw Chike standing at the edge of the forest one night, speaking to the wind. Another insisted that strange sounds came from his father's abandoned shrine, drums beating when no one was near, voices calling in the dead of night. Fear began to grow. Neighbors stopped visiting his compound. Those who greeted him did so with trembling voices, bowing quickly before moving away. Even the king kept silent, unwilling to confront him after Nana's mysterious death. Chike's wife noticed the change more than anyone else. Her husband, once lively and strong, now walked as though carrying an unseen burden. His touch was cold, his words distant. He ate little and often sat staring into the distance, his face unreadable. At night, she sometimes woke to find him missing from their bed. When she asked where he had gone, he only replied with silence. The women in the market pitied her. "She is living with a spirit, not a man," they whispered. But no one dared say it to her face, for fear that Chike's dark aura would fall upon them. And so the village watched him with growing dread. Each passing day, it seemed clearer that Chike was no longer walking among them as a mere man. Something older, something darker, had claimed him. And no one knew who would fall next.
What the people of Umuagu village did not know was that Chike,
upon seeing the threats and body language of his father's enemies, made a choice that would change his life forever. Fear of losing everything pushed him to do the very thing many had whispered about. He went back to the dreaded shrine of Alaogbaga, the god of destruction. That night was heavy with silence. The moon was covered by thick clouds, and the air smelled of burning palm oil lamps from hidden compounds. Chike walked alone into the deep forest path that led to the shrine. Every step he took echoed with memories of his father, the powerful man who once commanded fear and respect, the man who had offered his life as sacrifice to Alaogbaga in exchange for wealth and power. The shrine of Alaogbaga stood like a dark mouth waiting to swallow him. The carved wooden idols were smeared with old blood, their faces twisted in shapes that seemed alive in the torchlight. The air was thick with the smell of iron, palm wine, and decay. Chike's heart pounded, but he refused to turn back. He knew the enemies of his father were waiting for him to fail. If he remained ordinary, they would crush him. He would not allow it. The chief priest emerged from the shadows. His face was painted in ash and camwood, his eyes sharp like a hawk's. He carried a staff decorated with charms, feathers, and dried animal skulls. "Young Chike," the priest said slowly, his voice deep and frightening, "I knew this day would come. Your father's blood runs hot in you." Chike dropped to his knees, lowering his head to the dusty ground. His voice trembled but carried strength. "Great priest of Alaogbaga, I have come to beg the god. I cannot fight my father's enemies with empty hands. I want power, the kind that will silence all who rise against me. Let Alaogbaga accept me as he accepted my father." The priest stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Your father gave his life for 15 years of power. That is why he died when he did. What do you ask of the god of destruction?" Chike lifted his face. His eyes were firm, even in fear. "I beg for 20 years, 5 more than my father. Let me rule longer. Let me be greater. I offer myself as sacrifice." The priest's lips curled into a strange smile. He raised his staff and struck the ground 3 times. The earth seemed to tremble. Then, in a voice that shook like thunder, he chanted the forbidden names of Alaogbaga. From the shrine a wind rose suddenly, hot and choking. The carved wooden idols seemed to shift, their mouths stretching open as though they hungered for flesh. Chike's body shook, but he did not run. The priest cut Chike's arm with a sharp blade. Blood dripped into a calabash filled with dark herbs and ashes. He lifted it high and poured it over the altar. Then the priest spoke again. "Alaogbaga accepts you. Your blood is his. Your life is his. 20 years you shall have. 20 years of power. 20 years of rule. But when your time is done, nothing will save you." Chike bowed his head. His fate was sealed. In that moment, he felt something enter him, a force both heavy and cold. His chest tightened, his vision darkened, and when he opened his eyes, it was as if shadows moved with him. From that night on, Chike was no longer just a man. He carried the mark of Alaogbaga, the god of destruction, upon his soul.
Years passed in Umuagu village, and with each passing season, Chike grew more feared than his late father ever was. People used to say that Mazi Okonkwo, Chike's father, was a cruel man, one who took land at will and silenced those who opposed him. But when they spoke of Chike, their voices shook even more, for he was not only cruel, he was ruthless, unpredictable, and 3 times more dangerous. It started quietly. At first, Chike was only defending what his father had left behind. He chased away those who tried to reclaim land stolen by his father. But soon greed entered his heart like fire. He no longer waited for people to challenge him. He went after them. He began seizing more farmland, even from families who had no quarrel with him. Poor widows who depended on a small piece of land to feed their children were not spared. One widow fell on her knees before him, crying, "Chike, Biko, have mercy. This is the only land my children eat from." Chike's eyes were cold. He bent slightly, his voice like iron. "If your children are hungry, let them eat your tears. This land is mine now." He turned and walked away as the widow screamed in despair. No one could stop him. Even the king of Umuagu, who once commanded great respect, now feared Chike. In village meetings, the king often avoided confronting him. It was as if Chike's shadow alone had more power than the king's staff of office. When people complained about Chike's wickedness, the king only sighed and said, "We must not provoke him. His anger is not ordinary."
Perhaps it was true, for people whispered that Chike's eyes no longer looked human. They were sharp, cold, and always watching, like the eyes of a predator. When he spoke, his words were few, but they carried the weight of death. Farmers worked in silence when he passed by. Children were warned not to look at him too long. Women prayed that their husbands never crossed his path. But Chike's cruelty was not only against strangers. He turned his own family into victims of his hunger for power. His younger brother, Ebuka, was one of the first to feel his wrath. Ebuka had a gentle heart. He believed their father's wealth should be shared fairly, and he often pleaded with Chike to return some of the stolen lands. One day he said, in front of elders, "Brother, our father's wealth should be for us both. Let us live in peace." Chike laughed bitterly, his voice echoing, "Peace? A fool like you speaks of peace? You are not worthy to inherit even a single grain from this family. Let you beg like a dog, for that is what you are." Those words cut through Ebuka like a blade. From that day, he lived in shame, mocked by others for daring to challenge his brother. Some said Chike even drove Ebuka away from their father's compound, forcing him to start life afresh with nothing. While many feared Chike, his wife lived like a queen. She wore fine wrappers, heavy beads, and golden ornaments. The wives of other men envied her, for she never lacked anything. At the village square, when women gathered, she was the loudest voice. Once, an elder dared to speak against her. "Woman, this is not your place. Let the men decide." She rose slowly, her voice calm but sharp. "My place is wherever Chike's power places me. Speak against me again, and even your age will not save you." The elder bowed his head, muttering apologies, while the others sat in silence. Some nights, when the moon was bright and the villagers sat outside their huts, people whispered among themselves, "Chike has become more dangerous than his father. Even the gods must fear him. Is he truly a man or something else?" But those whispers never grew too loud, for everyone knew that rumors reached Chike faster than the wind, and those who spoke ill of him often suffered misfortune soon after. A roof would collapse on their heads, a farm would mysteriously dry up, a child would fall ill without cure. The people became convinced that Chike carried the spirit of Alaogbaga, the god of destruction, inside him. Fear spread like fire through the village. Families locked their doors earlier. Men avoided gatherings where Chike might appear. The marketplace grew quiet when he entered. No one dared to make eye contact with him. And so Chike ruled Umuagu not as a leader chosen by the people, but as a terror forced upon them. His name became both a warning and a curse. Parents frightened stubborn children by saying, "If you do not behave, Chike will come for you." His reign was dark, heavy, and without mercy, and it seemed nothing and no one could challenge him.
20 years had passed since Chike made his secret vow at the shrine of Alaogbaga, the god of destruction. In the eyes of the villagers, he was still the strongest, the most feared man in Umuagu. But in the silence of his own home, Chike was no longer the same. Every night he woke up drenched in sweat, gasping for breath. He saw shadows in the corners of his room, shapes moving where no one stood.
At times he thought he heard drums beating deep inside the earth, calling his name. His wife noticed his restlessness. "Chike, what troubles you? You do not eat, you do not sleep," she asked one night, her voice soft with worry. But Chike only stared into the darkness, his eyes heavy with fear. "Leave me," he whispered. "You cannot understand." The truth weighed on his chest like a stone. He remembered the words of the chief priest that day at the shrine. 20 years, no more. When the time is full, the god will take what is his. Now the time was full. 3 market days ago, the servant of the chief priest of Alaogbaga came to him to remind him his time was up. He must make himself present at the shrine for a final sacrifice so the god can take his life peacefully. The servant turned back and left right after delivering his message. There was no need for any reply from Chike. Chike tried to hide it from everyone, but he could not hide it from himself. Each passing day felt like the last beat of a drum before the final strike. His hands trembled when he held his staff. His once bold voice now cracked when he spoke. Alaogbaga was waiting. One night, he sat alone in his compound, staring at the moon. He whispered to himself, "I asked for 20 years of power, and I was given more than I dreamed. But now the god comes for me. If I run, he will find me. If I resist, he will strike not only me, but my wife, my children, my household. All will perish." Fear burned inside him. The same man who once made kings tremble was now trembling before the god he had served. The 20 years were gone. The debt was due.
The cock crowed, and the first light of dawn touched the roofs of Umuagu. Chike opened his eyes slowly. His chest felt heavy, as though a great stone sat upon it. He lay still for a moment, listening to the silence of his compound. Deep inside, he knew this might be his last morning. He rose quietly and washed his face. His hands shook as he tied his wrapper around his waist. Then he went to the small pen behind his hut. 2 large cocks stood there, strong and restless. They were sacred birds, chosen for sacrifice. Chike caught them with trembling hands, their wings flapping wildly, as if they too knew the journey ahead. His wife, Adaora, watched from the doorway. She leaned against the wall, curious. "Where are you going so early?" she asked, her tone gentle. Chike forced a small smile. "To the shrine. It is nothing. Go inside." But she stood there, her eyes searching his face. She saw the lines of fear, the shadows under his eyes. Still, she said nothing more. She watched him walk away, the 2 cocks struggling in his hands, and a strange chill passed through her heart. The path to the shrine was quiet, lined with tall trees that seemed to whisper in the morning breeze. Chike walked slowly, each step heavier than the last. His mind was filled with memories, the lands he seized, the families he scattered, the power he once enjoyed. All of it now felt like dry leaves in the wind, soon to be gone. At last, he reached the shrine of Alaogbaga. The air was thick, heavy, almost difficult to breathe. The old priest stood waiting, his eyes deep and knowing. "You have come," the priest said in a low voice. Chike knelt quickly, bowing his head. His body trembled. "Wise one, I am here. The time has come. Tell me what must be done. I do not wish for my household to perish." The priest looked down at him, his face stern. "You made a vow, Chike, and the god does not forget. Today, the offering must be complete. But know this, blood calls for blood. The god is not satisfied with fowls alone." Chike's heart sank. The cocks cried out in his hands, and he felt a shiver run through his entire body.
With a sudden motion, the priest raised his staff. "Lay them down," he commanded. Chike placed the birds on the small altar, his hands shaking. Their blood was spilled, and the sound of their wings fading filled the shrine like a dying echo. The priest lifted his eyes to the sky and said, "Alaogbaga, hear the voice of your servant. Blood has been poured as a sign of obedience." But Chike's heart was not at peace.
His chest rose and fell quickly, as if a storm was trapped inside him. He looked up, his voice breaking. "Wise one," he said, "let the god know these cocks are not just sacrifice. Their blood is my cry. Their blood must open his ears." His lips trembled. "Tell Alaogbaga, I am not ready to die." The priest's eyes narrowed, deep lines forming on his face. "You dare to bargain with a god?" Chike swallowed hard. Sweat rolled down his temples. "Yes," he said, "I have a new proposal. I beg you, let him hear me." His words rushed out, desperate, as if every breath might be his last. "I have tasted wealth. I have known the joy of children and the strength of power. I do not want to leave it all behind. I am ready to give something else, something greater, if only he will spare my life." The priest stood still, his staff pressed against the ground. The silence in the shrine was heavy, broken only by Chike's trembling voice. "What do you intend to offer?" the priest asked at last, his voice low, dangerous. Chike's eyes darted from side to side, as if searching for courage in the shadows. His lips quivered. He opened his mouth to speak, but no word came out. Instead, he bowed his head again, breathing fast. "Tell Alaogbaga I will give what he truly desires, not just blood of animals, something deeper, something living." The priest's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "Then speak clearly, Chike. What life do you dare place before the god?" Chike's silence stretched, heavy with fear and suspense.
Chike's desperate plea shakes the shrine as he dares to bargain with Alaogbaga, offering more than the blood of animals for his own survival. But his words leave a chilling question hanging in the air. What greater sacrifice could he be planning? The priest watches closely, knowing the next choice will decide Chike's fate. Stay tuned for the next episode, where the truth of Chike's terrifying proposal will be revealed.